was a few months ago. I was attending a gathering of the Oblates over at King's house. I don't recall the occasion. And I was approached at that gathering by Father David Uribe. And he asked me, might I consider speaking at one of the Novena nights this summer? Well, I was flattered, to tell you the truth. And I thought to myself, do I really want to do that? And then he said, I'd like you to speak on the topic of living with caregiving. I said, okay, I'll try to do something with that. And then I began to think to myself, you know, what is my best model of a caregiver? What's my best model of that? I had experienced different folk over the course of my life that I would consider caregivers, but what would be my best model? Well, it didn't take me long to come to the conclusion, Joseph, it's your own mother. I think my mother is the best model of a caregiver. She did it in her professional life, and she did it in her personal life. Mom was an LPN, worked for many years in the hospital, and cared, obviously, for many, many people. At a certain point in time, my paternal grandmother, my dad's mother, Mom's mother-in-law, became quite ill. We weren't going to leave her in a hospital. Mom brought her back to our house, and she cared for her until my grandmother passed away. Typical of my mother. A few more years passed. My father became quite ill with heart disease. Had a couple of heart attacks. Went through that quadruple bypass. Nothing seemed to work, on all kinds of medication. Finally, he retired from his job, and shortly after that, became so ill that it was necessary for him to have that quadruple bypass again. But the doctors told him that they wouldn't recommend it. He probably wouldn't survive. And so my mother said, well, now he's all mine. And she retired from her nursing position, and she became my father's caregiver. He came home. He was considered a cardiac invalid, which meant that he wasn't bedridden. He could get up and get around and do a few little things, but not much. Very limited energy. He put my mother to the test. And then I added to it. My heart's just fine. It wasn't that. In May of 1990, while serving as the pastor of a church in Miami, Florida, on a beautiful spring afternoon, I decided to go take a little walk in the park. Sat down on a bench overlooking Biscayne Bay. It was a beautiful spring afternoon. It was May 17th. You won't be surprised I remember the date. I was approached by someone while sitting on that bench who asked if he could sit down and join me. I wanted to say no, but I didn't. I said, okay. But I had a funny feeling from the beginning. Then he asked me, could I do a favor for him? And I said, no, I don't think so. And he said, well, I didn't even ask you what the favor was yet. I said, well, I suspect it probably has something to do with money, and I know I can't assist you in that way whatsoever. With that, my companion on the bench jumped on top of me, pulled out a screwdriver. That was his weapon. Hit me in the head with a screwdriver. Now I'm bleeding, and I'm struggling with him. I'm not a fighter. I didn't have to do this. I even said to him, we don't have to do this. I'll give it to you. That wasn't good enough. He flipped me off the bench, and I broke the left leg severely. Well, I'm in Miami, Mom's in Massachusetts, and gets a phone call. Your dear son is in the hospital. He got mugged in a park, and he has a broken leg. And my mother and my sister get on a plane in Boston and flew down to be my caregiver there. But me being the nasty person that I can be sometimes, when they walked into my hospital room that night, this is before the surgery on my leg, I looked at my mother, someone had told me they were coming, and I said to her, now just what do you think you're going to accomplish by being here? With that, my sister came over to me and she said, don't you talk to her like that. I didn't want them there. I didn't want to be in that hospital. I didn't like anything that was going on that day. I didn't like the idea that this joker came up and flipped me off the bench and broke my leg. I was mad and very, very, very uncomfortable. I was in the hospital about 3 weeks after the surgery. Ended up with a hip to ankle cast. If any of you have ever had that, you know what that's like. Mom stayed with me the whole time. Not at the hospital. She was actually sleeping in my bed at the rectory and would come over each day to be with me. And when it came time to be released, she got on the plane and flew home with me. And there's my dad, missing my mother, who was his caregiver, remember, welcoming us home, and now Mom had him and me. It was a tough summer, and I was an awful patient. I was very, very angry, probably mostly because I was being pulled away from my parish for 3 months, angry because I had this big little old cast on my leg and I couldn't do anything, and mostly angry because I had lost a whole bunch of my freedom, and I didn't appreciate that at all. But there was Mom, caring for me, driving me to the doctor when I had to go, whatever I had to do, she was right there. Every now and then, she'd say to me and my father, come on, jump in the car, we're going to take a parrot tour, just to get out of the house. I'll never forget it. That's why my mother is my primary model of a caregiver. I think about all that as I was preparing for this evening, and then I saw these words in the scriptures of this evening. The words were, let your kindness comfort me according to your promise to your servants. Let your compassion come to me, that I may live. Those are words from Psalm 119, which was our responsorial psalm for our Mass tonight. They are words that speak of kindness and compassion. Two characteristics, I would submit, are most essential in one who takes on the role of a caregiver. Each and every one of us has been the recipient of the kindness and compassion of the caregiver known as our mother. I just shared some of the experience I had with my own. But each and every one of us, in our infant and in our early years, we had to be taken care of by someone else. Our inability to care for ourselves at that particular time when our lives first began might be a place to begin our reflection this evening, because it was me who needed a caregiver. It was you who needed a caregiver then, and we were not left wanting. Certainly others joined our mothers in caring for us, and as we experienced their love and compassion in our earliest days, we learned. And as we got older, and perhaps other little ones began to appear in the family, probably we were expected to take on some responsibility for our siblings. Of course, the dads were always there as well, And along the way, we experience the care and the love of our grandparents, aunts and uncles, and others who made up part of our extended families. There always seemed to be someone there to provide the care and the attention that we needed. But sadly, this is not true for every child. But hopefully those of us here tonight can identify with it. We have been cared for over the course of our lives. And as the years pass, the role of being cared for can and does evolve into the role of offering care. Many of you are parents and know what it meant to be a caregiver to your own children. So the concept of being a caregiver, at least in that context, is easily understood by us. The topic for the Novena this evening is living through caregiving. But I think it just as easily could have been titled Loving Through Caregiving. Those two beautiful characteristics spoken of in Psalm 119, kindness and compassion, they become the very heart and soul of the caregiver, especially the one providing that care for one who is in a much later stage of life, or for one who is weakened in body or in mind, or maybe even in both. Oh yes, kindness and compassion, they are most necessary when you have those needs confronting you in a loved one. Kindness, compassion, and a whole lot of patience. Because, you know, the aging process, it affects us all. Youthful vigor and energy, it diminishes as we get a little bit older. Strong and healthy bodies can be and are affected by injury, disease, and deterioration. Physical limitations can prompt situations where one can't do for himself or herself as well as one once could. We never seem to want to ask for it, but oftentimes we need help to do some of the things that we always used to be able to do on our own. We begin to lose our sense of freedom and self-control. That was the worst part of my summer of 1990, recovering from that broken leg. We need someone to care for us. For the past 4 years, my oblate assignment has been as a chaplain at the apartment community, the facility for seniors here on the property of the Shrine of Our Lady of the Snows. And I have part of my cheering squad right here in front of me, residents from the apartment community. In many ways, that position demands of me to be a caregiver, to journey along with people in their senior years, to try to respond in a Christ-like manner to those who experience physical weakness or emotional weakness or cognitive weakness. The presence of a Catholic priest in that kind of a setting is very highly valued, not only among our Catholic residents, but to a faith-filled population from many Christian backgrounds. The chaplain in a place like this joins all the other caregivers that make up the entire staff at the apartment community. Our concern is for the totality of each individual. We approach our work by first and foremost acknowledging the dignity of each person, reminding ourselves that each one was given life by God and is made in His image and likeness. Sometimes we need to remind ourselves of that when weakness of body or mind causes a resident to behave in a manner no longer considered normal. It happens. We need that kindness, compassion, and patience, especially when our own day has become long and complicated. It is here that I remember the words of our Holy Father, Pope Francis, who always shows such kindness and compassion in everything he does. The Pope said this. He said, "You must stop. Look the person in the eyes and touch his or her hands. The reason is to preserve dignity, to see another person not as a pathology or a social condition, but as a human with a life whose value is equal to your own." What wonderful advice. Being a caregiver will test your stamina. Your heart can ache as you deal with a loved one who can't perform the basic aspects of life anymore. It is so difficult to live with one who has lost recognition or is no longer dealing with reality. Kindness and compassion over and over and over must rule the situation. I always remember dear old Mom saying, when things became rough and there didn't seem to be any solution, well, we do what we have to do. And we do it, never losing our respect for who we are doing it for. In my work, I have seen and admired many, many caregivers, from the medical staff, from the food service people, from the custodians and maintenance workers, all working out their tasks and carrying them out with the utmost care, kindness, and compassion. I have seen countless situations where sons and daughters have become mothers and fathers to their mother or their father. I have seen folks spend hours with some who have lost all sense of reality, but cling to that one familiar face that they still can recall. I told you, we could have renamed tonight's Novena topic to Loving Through Caregiving. But even with all these feel-good stories, we also are aware of those who are so alone, those who have no visitors, those who have no family caregivers, and you wonder, how can this be? Sometimes the kindness, compassion, patience, and caring aren't there to the extent that they should be. When that denial of the basic dignity of the human being is forgotten, the ultimate end seems to come more quickly. If you are the recipient of a caregiver's attention, thank God for it. And by all means, thank your caregiver. If you find yourself in the role of a caregiver, God bless your love, kindness, and compassion. By all means, pray for patience, because you'll need it. And always trust that God will provide. Those receiving our care deserve it. Easily it could be us in need of similar care someday. To quote our Pope again, see another person not as a pathology or a social condition, but as a human with a life whose value is equal to your own. So let's step up then and enter into the world of caregiving whenever a need demands it. Let's be willing to take the time to assist those who need assistance and discover the depth of your own kindness and compassion. On occasion, put yourself in the shoes of that handicapped individual now needing a walker to get around, or that person suffering from dementia who has lost touch with reality. Walk a mile in their shoes and learn the true meaning of kindness, compassion, and caring. And then experience the love and gratefulness of those who are hurting, and find a little joy, a little happiness again, because you cared. Recall those great musical lyrics. He or she ain't heavy. They're my brother or sister. Always remembering the words of Jesus. Whatsoever you do to the least or to the greatest of my people, that you do unto me. Patiently giving care and showing concern, getting out of ourselves to reach out to others. That, my friends, is the greatest love of all. With all that in mind, we ask God's blessing upon us all here tonight. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen.